Thank you, Bruce. Good morning and welcome to the Treasure Coast Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Stuart, Florida. Today is September the 6th, 2020. My name is Janet Rader and I'll be your worship associate today. Many of you fondly remember Claudia Jimenez when she was at TCUUC for a year as she fulfilled a requirement for becoming a fellowshipped minister. She is now Minister of Faith Development at the UU Congregation of Asheville, North Carolina. We are delighted to have her with us again today. And a big thank you to those who are helping with the service. Bruce Ruby, our music director, Karen Frank, our Zoom host, plus Ken Texera and Janet Grote, who are on standby in case we need technical help. We will mute everyone to avoid any noise in the background. Please remain muted. We are a welcoming congregation. We welcome people of all gender identities, races, ages, and backgrounds. Thank you for being with us today. We are holding Zoom services every Sunday at 11 a.m. and hope you can continue to join with us. Announcements are found in our Friday online newsletter. To be put on our email list or to find out more information about us, go to our website at tcuuc.org. In the Friday newsletter, there will be a link you can use to get in to the Sunday Zoom service. While you are there, please notice the link for online giving or send a check to 21 Southeast Central Parkway, Stuart, Florida, 34997. These days you only see our minister Bob and Karina, our religious educator of our staff, in the sanctuary and on the Zoom talks, but Debbie, our fantastic administrator, is here on the payroll. And our beautiful building still demands things like insurance and maintenance. Thank you for your continuing support. I will now light our chalice. Oops. We light this chalice in honor of the bravery and bold action of women who came before us as we celebrate the centennial of the 19th Amendment, which reads, "The right of citizens of the U.S. to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the U.S. or by any state on account of sex." Knowing that Claudia would be speaking about an amazing woman who was a UU minister made me reflect on the centennial of the 19th Amendment. Our Social Justice Committee is participating in an effort to get out the vote with New Florida Majority. In this effort, a number of us have participated with other UUs in phone banks, urging our fellow citizens to vote. Perhaps as a result of this effort, I was drawn to news of the recent dedication of an amazing sculpture in my hometown of Lexington, Kentucky. The artwork commemorates women suffragettes who fought for the passing of the 19th Amendment. It is simply named Stand. The 5 20-foot aluminum silhouetted sculptures serve as a reminder of the historical significance of the women who pushed for suffrage, the achievement of the 19th Amendment, as well as the continuing fight for women's rights, representation, and equality. Now we will sing hymn 1010, We Give Thanks. Please sing through twice.
Precious day, for all gathered here, and this far away, for this time we share, with loving care, we give thanks for this precious day. We give thanks for each inward soul, for all gathered here, beautiful and whole, for each time we share, with love and care. We give thanks for each wondrous soul. We give thanks for each loving heart, for all gathered here, that when we're apart, for each time we share, with loving care, we give thanks for each loving heart.
Now let us recite our affirmation, speaking the first verse and singing the second. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Good morning. Buenos dias. It is good to see some familiar faces and to be with you this morning. I offer you a time for all ages today. Ask Carolyn to Help by Denise Tracy. Who does that woman think she is? She is charging $100 a day? And for what? Well, Mr. Mayor, sir, she knows exactly who she is. Carolyn Bartlett Crane is a Unitarian minister who revitalized a Unitarian church in Kalamazoo, Michigan, by creating a 7-day program of practical Christianity. Her Unitarian church had a gymnasium, a literacy club for the Black community, an orchestra, a choir, a kindergarten, and Sunday services. She discovered the filth in slaughterhouses and saw to it that legislation was passed so standards for cleanliness were enforced by state of Michigan inspectors. She formed a women's civic improvement league and got the women of Kalamazoo to dress in white and to sweep the streets to keep disease from spreading. She started a visiting nurse program, a counseling service, and an employment service. She has inspected 62 cities in 14 states and advocated for legislation in most of them, which passed. The officials in those cities and states say if you want sanitary meat, clean streets, or solidarity with the poor and needy, ask Carolyn Bartlett Crane. So yes, $100 a day in 1918 is a high fee. And you are probably thinking, Mr. Mayor, sir, that $100 is especially high for a woman. But if we need help, if we want our streets clean, if we want our meat sanitary and safe to eat, and if we want to have solidarity with those in need, the fee is not so high. I might add, Mr. Mayor, sir, that help in any of these areas would look good to the voters in the election next year. $100 a day to be reelected may not be such a high price to pay. There was silence. Ah, yes, the election, the mayor replied. 100 a day? Well, yes, I suppose if we need her, we must ask this Caroline to help. Let's write the letter today, shall we? Yes, let's ask Caroline for help. And that is our story today. And I look forward to sharing with you a little bit more about Caroline's ministry.
Thank you, Claudia. Now is our time to share our joys and sorrows. I will move a stone for you. These stones represent our lives rolling down the rivers of our souls. Okay, for those whose joys or sorrows may be too private to share, know that our hearts are with you. And now we turn to Claudia.
And now let us take a moment. I would like to invite us to sit comfortably, close our eyes or lower our gaze, and take a few deep breaths. And I offer you a prayer for those who labor, adapted from the words of Eddie Rozelle, who is the Minister of Economic Justice for the United Church of Christ. Spirit of love, compassion, and justice within us and around us. On this Labor Day Sunday, bless all people who labor, either for pay or as volunteers, in jobs or at school, in the workplace or at home. We hold in love and light laborers who do not have jobs, and those whose jobs do not meet their basic needs. May we work to build a new way of being, not returning to the pre-pandemic ways of being that normalized abuse, exploitation, and racism. May we work for a world where all laborers are valued, a world where those who clean houses can buy houses of their own, a world where those who plant and harvest food can also afford to eat their fill. We hope for a world where all workers everywhere have opportunities to earn a living wage and are able to sustain themselves. We hope for these things knowing that they are not easy to achieve. May we have the courage and strength to embrace hope that is rooted in action, rooted in the willingness to live out our faith in the workplace, marketplace, and communities we are a part of. Amen. Let us share a moment of silence. Our reading this morning is Turning to One Another by Margaret Wheatley. There is no power greater than a community discovering what it cares about. Ask what's possible, not what's wrong. Keep asking. Notice what you care about. Assume that there are many others that share your dreams. Be brave enough to start a conversation that matters. Talk to people you know. Talk to people you don't know. Talk to people you never talk to. Be intrigued by the differences you hear.
Quality writing makes your schoolwork better.
Expect to be
And
surprised.
help you stand out in the process.
Treasure curiosity more than certainty. Invite in everybody who cares to work on what's possible. Acknowledge that everyone is an expert about something. Know that creative solutions come from connections. Remember, you don't fear people whose stories you know. Real listening always brings people closer together. Trust that meaningful conversations can change your world. Rely on human goodness and stay together. The words of Margaret Wheatley. So this morning, I am going to share with you a little bit about the life and ministry of Carolyn Bartlett Crane. And I want you to imagine going back to the time of the frontier in the Midwest in 1887. And imagine that you are in a church in South Dakota and getting ready to listen to service. And in your group is a young girl named Queenie. And she has come to service with her mother to the Sioux Falls Unity Church. As she and her older brother get settled into the pew, a visiting minister takes his place at the pulpit. Unable to control her surprise, Queenie exclaims, "Why, Mama, there's a man in the pulpit." Her brother hushes her. "Yes, Queenie, men do preach, sometimes." This is a story told by Carolyn Bartlett Crane of a pulpit exchange she arranged at her first church. Today, women comprise approximately 60% of Unitarian Universalist ministers. But in the late 19th century, there were few Unitarian or Universalist women ministers in the United States. Both denominations hesitated to defy traditional gender roles by allowing women into the patriarchal institution of ministry. Many women worked behind the scenes without title or pay. If women felt called to ministry, overcame the obstacles to theological education, and became ministers, finding a job in the East, the hub of Unitarian Universalism, was difficult. And so despite grueling conditions and low pay, some women could be found ministering to small, unstable congregations on the frontier, jobs that the men would not take. A group of 21 courageous, visionary women, bound by shared values and experiences, supported each other in ministry on the frontier. They formed a sisterhood that embraced the young Carolyn Bartlett Crane. Our story this morning highlighted other visionary work she did in public health after leaving parish ministry. Also fascinating stories. However, today our focus will be ministry in the parish. So who was she? Who was Carolyn Bartlett Crane? She was born in Wisconsin in 1858. At an early age, she questioned church dogma. How could God afflict pain arbitrarily or consign unbaptized babies and heathens to hell? And what about resurrection? What is that about? She wondered. Her doubts were ignored or rebuked. She found support in the sisterhood of like-minded women who understood her struggle and her interest in ministry. Her family encouraged her education, hoping that she would outgrow her desire to be a minister. Carolyn attended college and graduated at the top of her class. She became a teacher and later on a journalist, but still wanted to pursue ministry. But her father kept saying no. And she persisted until finally he said yes. Caroline studied independently, mentored by progressive ministers. Her first ministry was at All Souls Church in Sioux Falls, where we met Queenie. Later, she served the First Unitarian Church in Kalamazoo, Michigan, a church that was losing membership after a period of congregational conflict, a church that none of the other ministers wanted to take on. But Carolyn was intrigued by the challenge of serving a dying church. Kalamazoo, at the time, was a city without resources to deal with transience, disease, and juvenile delinquency as industrialization, immigration, and urbanization transformed America. Crane saw an opportunity to expand her ministry beyond the walls of the church. She envisioned a church that served the community 7 days a week. Crane wrote that there was no church so small, weak, and isolated that it cannot and ought not find a work of love to do. She recalled members of the church telling her that they only needed a minister to provide funerals. Some members were reluctant to embrace a female minister. Her intelligence, preaching, and yes, organizational skills eclipsed the issue of gender, and the church grew under her leadership. Her sermons expanded the definition of church and propelled community engagement. Crane stated that once the congregation started to grow, even the dear old people concluded not to die for a while, but to stay and work in the church. Crane revitalized the religious education program, added a midweek service, and encouraged study clubs. The Unity Study Club researched the city's sewerage, water supply, and education to better understand the challenges of their community. Crane's ministry was influenced by the social gospel movement that emerged in the late 1880s. The growth of cities created horrible living conditions for many. The need for services, education, and spiritual sustenance was pervasive. Leaders of the social gospel movement advocated Christian engagement to address the oppressive living conditions of the laboring class. It led to a questioning of theologies that ignored the poor. Walter Rosenbusch, a Baptist minister, wrote, "When we learn from the Gospels, for instance, that God is on the side of the poor and that he proposes to view anything done or not done to them as having been done or not done to him, such a revelation of solidarity and humanity comes with a regenerating shock to our selfish minds." His work inspired Carolyn Bartlett Crane, or the Notorious CBC, as she became known on Twitter. Just kidding. Crane believed that a 7-day church could be the true church, relevant to its time and locality, that it could create programs that would address societal problems. You see, Crane inspired her congregation to work for the common good, not just personal salvation. Her definition of a spiritual person was an individual who believes, reveres, and serves the good, which others call God, she said. This idea reflects humanist tendencies in Unitarianism that were rejected in the eastern part of the country, and it anticipated the modern humanist emphasis on being good rather than focusing on theology. Deeds, not creeds. I think you've heard that before. The idea of community outreach mobilized the Kalamazoo Church during Crane's ministry. In 1893, a wealthy member donated funds for a building to serve the community through non-sectarian and philanthropic programs. A year later, in 1894, the People's Church was dedicated, and Crane proposed a name to reflect its inclusive, non-sectarian nature. Today, it is still called People's Church of Kalamazoo. This new church included a kindergarten classroom, a gym for women, a literacy club for the Black community, and vocational programs. These programs filled important needs in the community. The church was careful not to duplicate services provided by existing organizations. Crane wrote, "The chief function of the seven-day church was to inaugurate good works which ought to be carried on at public charge, but for which the public did not yet recognize the responsibility." And eventually they did, because the kindergarten and vocational programs offered at the People's Church were so popular that the school district taxed itself to create similar programs in the public schools. Crane preached. She breathed life into and revived a dwindling congregation by inspiring a sense of responsibility, by appealing to conscience and to the logical extension of Unitarian values translated into community action. Her advocacy of action beyond the walls of the church had meaningful and lasting impacts in her community. How does Carolyn Bartlett Crane's ministry inspire us today? Where do you see opportunities for personal spiritual growth and community outreach in this congregation? What would that look like in this time of physical distancing? Crane's humanist, liberal People's Church was heretical. Today, non-creedal Unitarian Universalism is often misunderstood. Yet there are increasing numbers of people rejecting a lot of the orthodoxy and divisive teachings who are searching for a spiritual home. Unitarian Universalist congregations like ours can provide opportunities for spiritual discernment and sustenance that fortifies us for the ever more critical work of living our values out in the world. If Crane could succeed in a small frontier town in the 1890s, what can TCUUC do in 2020? What is your vision for TCUUC in a time when we are confronting racism and concerned about the upcoming election and just the state of our nation? Crane's story is one of persistence, vision, and a profound ministry of impactful change. I can't predict how this congregation will grow and evolve, but I fervently believe that through engagement, our lives and those of the people we touch can be richer and more meaningful. Through realizing the power of our collective agency, we can come closer to that long-held goal of the inclusive, beloved community we talk about so much. What possibilities do you see? And now I offer you this song by Connie K. Lim, known as Milk, in which she sings about her vision of beloved community. So what would it be like if our UU values rule the world? We have 58 days until the election. Go forth this morning and think about how you can contribute of your time, talent, and treasure to create that beloved community that we all dream about.
Thank you, Claudia. It's always a treat for us, for you to be with us, and certainly it was this morning. As I extinguish the chalice, realize that we're not extinguishing our hope for the future, our courage in the face of crisis, or the love we share. Following the postlude, please stay around for the coffee hour. And now our flame will be extinguished.
Go in peace. That was in honor of John Lewis, who labored for justice.
We'll now go to coffee hour. Is that where we are?